When someone wounds us, the first reaction of the heart is often not reason, but pain. Pain cries out for revenge, or at least for some sharp word to balance the scales. But if we live only in the reflex of hurt, we become chained to the very people who harmed us. The injury then governs us long after the moment has passed. Dealing with those who hurt us does not mean pretending the wound never happened. To ignore hurt is not strength, it is denial. True strength lies in facing the wound honestly, acknowledging it, naming it, and then deciding how to live beyond it. For the deeper question is not, what did they do to me, but rather, what will I become because of it? We must remember that people hurt others most often from their own weakness. A sharp tongue comes from a restless spirit. Betrayal is born from fear or selfish hunger. Cruelty is often a disguise for insecurity. To see this is not to excuse it, but to understand that their action reveals more about their own condition than about our worth. The choice, then, is whether we let their weakness shape us into bitterness or whether we turn the injury into a teacher. When we choose forgiveness, we are not declaring that the wound was small. We are declaring that it will not own us. Forgiveness is not the absence of justice. It is the refusal to let revenge consume our humanity. Sometimes, of course, wisdom demands distance. Forgiving does not always mean continuing in the same closeness. To forgive someone who harmed you deeply may still require that you protect your heart, set boundaries, and walk in safer paths. Love does not ask us to be foolish, it asks us to remain free from hatred, and freedom is the key. Those who hurt you can injure your body, your reputation, perhaps even your opportunities. But only you decide whether they will injure your soul. If you choose resentment, you hand them that power. If you choose forgiveness, even with trembling hands, you keep your soul untouchable. So when the sting of betrayal rises, pause. Ask not how you might repay the hurt, but what kind of person you want to become through it. Every wound gives us that choice to grow harder or wiser, colder or freer. To deal with those who hurt you is, in the end, not about them at all. It is about the person you refuse to stop becoming. True strength is not in denying pain, but in facing it honestly and choosing how to respond. When we are hurt, our instinct is to run from the feeling or cover it with anger, but denial never heals anything. To deny pain is to give it hidden roots inside us. It festers quietly, shaping our attitudes, slipping into our words, and often spilling out on those who had no part in causing it. The one who pretends they are untouched by pain is not strong but fragile, for the smallest reminder will awaken the wound again. Strength is found in looking at the wound clearly, admitting its depth, and then choosing a path forward that is not dictated by it. Imagine the difference between two people who both suffer betrayal. One insists it does not matter, brushing it off with forced laughter, but later finds their trust in everyone corroding. They never speak of the wound, yet suspicion poisons their relationships. The other acknowledges the betrayal openly, allowing the grief to be felt, allowing the tears to come, and then carefully considers how to live with trust again. The first carries the wound as a secret master, the second carries it as a teacher. The difference is honesty. To face pain honestly is not weakness. It takes great courage to admit I am hurt. It is easier to wear the armor of indifference or the mask of anger. Anger feels powerful, indifference feels safe, but neither brings healing. Healing begins the moment one can sit quietly and name the pain for what it is. In that honesty, the wound loses its power to define us. Strength is not found in the instant response, but in the deliberate choice that follows. When someone wrongs us, the reflex is retaliation. We imagine words that cut deeper, acts that repay the sting. Yet true strength does not live in reflex. Reflex belongs to instinct, not reason. It is the response of animals who bite when cornered. Humans are called to something higher, the ability to pause, to consider, and then to choose. This choice is the real test. Every hurt offers two roads. The first road is resentment. It promises satisfaction, but delivers chains. The second road is forgiveness. It promises struggle but delivers freedom. To forgive is not to say the wound was small or unimportant. It is to say, I will not let this wound control the kind of person I become. In that choice lies strength. Consider how often people carry hurts from years ago, wounds inflicted by words long forgotten by the speaker. The hurt remains alive only because it was denied, never faced, never consciously released. Those who deny pain are bound to it. Those who face it can choose to release it. Strength is not in avoiding pain, but in mastering its influence. There is a false idea that strength is always loud, always forceful, always victorious in conflict. But often the strongest act is silent endurance, the steady refusal to be hardened. When insult comes, strength is in answering with patience. When betrayal arrives, strength is in choosing not to become a betrayer in return. The weak mirror what they suffer, the strong transform it, and transformation begins with honesty. You cannot transform what you refuse to see. Denial blinds us, while honesty allows us to see the raw material of suffering. Only then can it be reshaped into wisdom. Like iron that must pass through fire to become steel, the heart must sometimes pass through hurt to become strong. But the fire must be acknowledged, not ignored. Pretending there is no fire leaves you unprepared for its heat. Facing pain honestly also allows compassion to grow. Once you have admitted your own wounds, you become gentler with the wounds of others. You see in them the same struggles, the same frailties. You recognize that the harsh words spoken against you may have come from a place of inner torment. This does not excuse their action, but it enlarges your understanding. Compassion is born when we stop pretending we are invulnerable and admit that all hearts can be broken. Strength is not coldness, but warmth in the face of harm. It is the ability to remain human when others act less than human. Coldness is only a shell, a brittle defense. Warmth requires courage, for it risks being hurt again, but it also opens the way to deeper healing and richer relationships. Choosing how to respond is the essence of freedom. The hurt itself may not have been your choice, but the response is always yours. That choice determines whether the hurt defines your future or whether you rise above it. To deny pain is to let it rule you secretly. To face it and choose your response is to rule yourself. In life, you cannot avoid being hurt. Friends will fail you, strangers will wrong you, even those you love most will sometimes wound you. To demand a life free of pain is to demand a life without relationships. Since pain is inevitable, the question is not how to escape it, but how to carry it. Will you carry it as a burden that bends you toward bitterness, or as a lesson that shapes you toward wisdom? Strength is found in carrying it with dignity. That dignity begins with honesty, admitting the wound without shame, allowing it to be felt without letting it consume you. The strong person is not the one who says, I was never hurt, but the one who says, I was hurt, and yet I choose to rise. Even when wounds cut deeply, you remain the master of your response. No one can take that from you unless you surrender it. To face pain and still choose love, to acknowledge sorrow and still choose hope, to admit betrayal and still choose trust in goodness. That is the deepest form of strength. Most hurtful actions come from another's weakness, not your worth. When someone lashes out at you with words, or when their betrayal stings more sharply than any wound of the body, it is natural to wonder, what is wrong with me? Why did they do this to me? But the truth is that most cruelty is not a reflection of your value at all. It is a mirror of the other person's struggle, their fear, their brokenness. People hurt others most often not because the victim deserves it, but because the one inflicting the pain cannot bear the weight of their own unrest. The angry voice often belongs to a soul that feels small and unheard. Anger is a shield, a way of masking weakness. When people belittle you, it is usually because they are secretly afraid of being insignificant themselves. When they betray you, it is often because they fear scarcity, of love, of recognition, of success, and they imagine they must take from you to preserve their own share. When they mock or wound with words, it is often because they see in you something they lack, something that reminds them of their own incompleteness. Their action reveals them, not you. To understand this is to gain freedom. The wound still hurts, but it loses its power to define you. Instead of allowing their weakness to become your identity, you see it for what it is, evidence of their own struggle. It is like standing in the rain and blaming yourself for getting wet. The rain falls because of clouds beyond your control. You get wet, yes, but the storm is not about you. So it is with hurt. You may feel it sting, but the storm came from their own weathered skies. This does not mean excusing wrong actions. A betrayal is still a betrayal. A lie is still a lie. It means refusing to let their actions write the story of who you are. Your worth is not reduced because someone else could not honor it. The diamond remains a diamond even if someone throws it in the mud. The sun remains the sun even if someone curses its heat. Your value is not measured by another's ability to see it, and certainly not by their weakness in handling it. Yet it is tempting, when wounded, to internalize the pain. Children grow up carrying words spoken by wounded parents, teachers, or friends, and they begin to believe those words define them. Adults carry the weight of rejection in relationships or workplaces and interpret that rejection as a verdict on their inadequacy. But every insult, every act of cruelty is more like a reflection in a broken mirror. The image may be distorted, but the distortion is not you. It is the crack in the mirror itself. To forget this is to live your life imprisoned by other people's fractures. The greatest freedom comes when you learn to look at those who hurt you with eyes of understanding. Not to excuse them, not to invite them to hurt you again, but to see that their behavior was born of weakness. It is far harder to look at the one who wronged you and think they acted this way because they could not rise above their own fear, their own emptiness. Yet when you see this, their power over you diminishes. Their insult no longer dictates your worth. Their betrayal no longer poisons your identity. You recognize that they acted not because you are small, but because they felt small themselves. Think of a time when someone wounded you with words that seemed cruel beyond reason. Later, you may have discovered that they were themselves facing failure, rejection, or deep insecurity. Their attack was less about you than about escaping their own pain. Weakness seeks to spread itself, and often it does so by wounding others. Recognizing this does not erase the sting, but it reframes the experience. It shifts the burden from your shoulders back onto theirs, where it belongs. This is why compassion becomes possible even toward those who wound us. Not compassion that erases justice or demands continued closeness, but compassion that sees beyond the surface. When you realize that their cruelty was born of weakness, you may find pity mingling with your pain. For who among us has not, in our own weakness, hurt someone we did not mean to hurt? Who has not spoken sharply when our heart was restless, or withdrawn love when we were afraid of being rejected first? To see weakness in others is to be reminded of the weakness in ourselves. This recognition does not make the hurt vanish, but it transforms the way you carry it. Instead of allowing their weakness to plant bitterness in you, you allow it to plant wisdom. You learn that your worth cannot be measured by fragile hands. You learn that you must not give others the power to define you, for they are often fighting battles you cannot see. You learn that pain, while real, need not enslave you to false conclusions about yourself. The next time you are hurt by someone's words or actions, pause before turning the wound inward. Ask instead, what must they have been carrying to act this way? This question does not justify the hurt, but it gives perspective. And perspective is the beginning of freedom. For when you see that their action came from weakness, you can release yourself from the lie that it was about your worth. Many people live entire lives chained to the opinions of others. A father's harsh judgment, a friend's betrayal, a stranger's insult, all become voices that echo inside, shaping identity. But if those actions were born from weakness, then they are not true reflections of you at all. They are reflections of brokenness in others. To understand this is to break the chain. You no longer carry their weakness as your burden. You carry your own dignity instead. Even the strongest among us are tempted to forget this truth. In moments of hurt, it feels easier to believe the pain is proof of our unworthiness. But the deeper reality is that those who hurt others are revealing themselves. They are confessing their frailty, their emptiness, their fear. And though their actions may leave scars, the scars need not speak of your value. They speak of the storms they could not calm within themselves. To live in this understanding is to walk lighter. You still feel the sting of words, the ache of betrayal, but you do not build your life upon them. You see them as passing shadows, evidence not of your lack but of theirs. And so you rise above, not by denying the wound, but by denying the lie that it was ever about your worth. Forgiveness is not excusing the wrong, but refusing to let it control your soul. When someone harms you, their action enters your life like a sharp stone thrown into still water. The ripples spread far beyond the initial wound. Even when the stone has long sunk to the bottom, the waves continue to disturb the surface. In the same way, the act of hurt may be over, the moment may have passed, yet its echoes remain in the heart. To forgive is to calm those waters, not by pretending the stone never fell, but by choosing not to let the ripples dictate the course of your life. There is a common misunderstanding that forgiveness means declaring the wrong unimportant or pretending it never happened. But to forgive does not mean you are blind to the injustice or indifferent to the wound. Forgiveness begins with clear sight, with acknowledging fully the depth of what was done. If you excuse the wrong, you are not forgiving, you are ignoring. And ignored wounds never heal, they fester. Forgiveness is not amnesia. It is the conscious act of saying, this wrong was real, it was painful, it should not have happened. Yet I will not let it poison my soul. The power of hurt lies not only in the moment it is delivered, but in the way it lingers afterward. A cruel word can echo in memory for years. A betrayal can create walls of distrust that affect every relationship that follows. An injustice can fill the heart with such bitterness that it overshadows joy. Forgiveness does not erase memory, but it breaks the chain between the memory and your present. It says, this happened, but it will not be the master of me. Without forgiveness, the one who hurt you continues to shape your life long after the event, holding power they do not even know they have. With forgiveness, you reclaim your freedom. Many resist forgiveness because they believe it is weakness, a surrender, a letting the other person win. But forgiveness is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. Anyone can hold on to anger. It takes no effort to nurture bitterness, but to release anger when you have every reason to hold it, to refuse the intoxicating taste of revenge, requires a courage most do not find. Forgiveness is strength because it refuses to be enslaved by the past. It is an act of rebellion against the power of pain. It declares, you may have hurt me, but you will not own me. It is important to remember that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same. Forgiveness is an inner act, a choice you make within yourself, whether or not the other person ever apologizes or changes. Reconciliation requires two hearts. Forgiveness requires only one. You may forgive and still keep distance. You may forgive and still establish boundaries. Forgiveness does not demand that you step again into harm's way. It does not mean you trust the one who betrayed you to betray you again. It means that within your soul you have chosen freedom over bitterness, release over chains. There is a mystery in forgiveness, for it transforms not only the forgiver, but also the nature of the wound itself. What once felt like an open cut can become, in time, a scar that speaks of strength rather than weakness. When you forgive, the narrative shifts. The story is no longer about how you were broken, but about how you overcame. The wrong remains wrong, but it becomes part of a larger truth, that no wrong has the final word over you unless you grant it that power. It is natural to resist this path. The heart cries out for justice, for repayment, for the scales to be balanced. Yet so often the repayment never comes, the apology is never spoken, the wrong is never corrected. To wait on these things before choosing forgiveness is to chain yourself to the offender indefinitely. You stand still in life, demanding that the one who hurt you must first repair the damage before you can move on. But forgiveness does not wait on them. It is your decision, your release. It says, even if they never make this right, I will not let this define me. The world confuses justice with revenge, but they are not the same. Justice seeks restoration, fairness, the upholding of what is right. Revenge seeks to wound in return. Justice can heal a community. Revenge only multiplies harm. Forgiveness does not erase the need for justice. Sometimes it even strengthens it. But forgiveness removes the poison of revenge from your veins. It allows you to pursue justice, if justice is possible, with clarity rather than hatred. And when justice is not possible, forgiveness keeps your soul from corroding under the weight of bitterness. Think of those who carry resentment for decades. Their faces become hardened, their voices sharp, their joy dimmed. They rehearse the wound until it becomes the centerpiece of their identity. In this way, the wrong done to them once continues to do harm every day afterward. Forgiveness is the refusal to let that story dominate you. It is the decision to write a different ending. Even if the wrong cannot be undone, the future need not be dictated by it. Forgiveness allows you to step out of the shadow of the wound and into the light of freedom. There is another truth. Forgiveness is not a single act completed in an instant, but often a process, a choice renewed again and again. Some wounds are so deep that they must be forgiven 100 times in the heart before they lose their sting. Each time the memory returns with its old anger, you are faced again with the choice to let bitterness reign or to release it once more. This repetition does not mean you have failed to forgive. It means you are human, and forgiveness is a journey as much as a decision. In forgiving, you discover a paradox. The one who hurt you may never change, may never even know you have forgiven them, yet you yourself are changed. The act of forgiveness cleanses the heart like fresh water flowing through a long, stagnant stream. It clears space for peace, for joy, for love. It gives you back to yourself. What was once a soul weighed down by anger becomes light again. What was once a heart chained to memory becomes free to live in the present. To forgive is not to deny the reality of pain, but to deny it final authority. It is to look at the wound squarely and say, you happened, but you will not own me. You will not define the rest of my days. I will live beyond you. Forgiveness is the soul's declaration of independence from the tyranny of harm. It is not weakness, nor naivety, nor denial. It is strength, clarity, and freedom. Boundaries protect you. Distance may be wisdom, even when forgiveness is given. Forgiving someone is a matter of the heart, a release of the burden of bitterness. But forgiveness does not mean placing yourself again where you can be struck by the same hand. There is a quiet wisdom in understanding that love and trust are not identical. Love can endure, love can forgive, love can release, but trust is something that must be earned and guarded carefully. To forgive is to set your heart free. To establish boundaries is to keep your freedom safe when someone hurts you deeply. The natural question is what comes next. Do you let them remain close, or do you step back? Many confuse forgiveness with blind reconciliation, as though forgiving means returning to the same vulnerable place without caution. But the truth is that forgiveness and reconciliation walk different paths. Forgiveness is the healing of your soul. Reconciliation is the restoration of a relationship. Forgiveness is your decision. Reconciliation requires theirs. You may forgive fully and still know that it is not wise, not safe, not even loving to allow that person the same place in your life again. Boundaries are not walls built from hatred, but fences built from wisdom. They do not say, I reject you forever. They say, I will not allow you to harm me again. A boundary honors both the reality of the wound and the dignity of your own soul. It acknowledges that while you have released the bitterness, you will not ignore the lessons of experience. To live without boundaries is to invite repeated injury. To live with them is to acknowledge that love must sometimes be expressed through distance rather than closeness. Think of a fire. It provides warmth, light, and life when it is kept within its proper place, but when it spreads without limits, it consumes everything in its path. Relationships are much the same. Without boundaries, they can consume your peace, your sense of self, your well-being. Boundaries provide the hearth, the safe structure, where love can exist without turning destructive. To forgive someone does not mean giving them permission to set fire to your life again. It means you have chosen peace, but you will also guard that peace with wisdom. Distance does not cancel forgiveness. Many carry guilt when they forgive but feel they cannot return to the same intimacy. They wonder, if I truly forgave, shouldn't I welcome them back? Yet the truth is that love is not foolishness. To forgive a thief does not mean handing them the keys to your home. To forgive a betrayer does not mean entrusting them again with your deepest secrets. Forgiveness releases the poison from your heart, but wisdom tells you whether the relationship should continue and in what form. Distance is not hatred. Distance can be a form of respect for yourself and for the truth of what has happened. Setting boundaries requires courage. It is far easier to drift back into harmful patterns, to allow the pressure of others' expectations or your own longing for peace to lead you back into unsafe closeness. But courage is in standing firm, in saying, I have forgiven, but I will not allow this again. Such words may seem harsh to some, but they are acts of love toward your own soul. Without boundaries, forgiveness becomes empty, for the same wounds will return again and again until your spirit is exhausted. With boundaries, forgiveness has room to flourish, because you are no longer living under constant harm. There is also a subtle danger in thinking that forgiveness demands proof. Some imagine that if they maintain distance, it means they have not forgiven. But forgiveness is not measured by the nearness of the offender. It is measured by the freedom of your heart. You may never see the one who hurt you again and still have forgiven them completely. You may choose to walk away forever and still be at peace. Forgiveness is about what you release inside yourself, not about what you must endure from others. Boundaries also serve a higher purpose. They teach others how to treat you. When you set a boundary with gentleness but firmness, you are saying, I value myself enough not to accept harm. In this way, boundaries are not only protective but instructive. They help others see where respect begins and ends. They create the possibility for healthier relationships, even with those who once wounded you, because they establish a clear line that must not be crossed again. Without boundaries, the cycle of harm continues. With them, there is at least the chance of change even within close relationships. Boundaries preserve love. Parents must set them with children, friends with friends, partners with partners. Without them, love can twist into control, care into manipulation, closeness into suffocation. Forgiveness can mend the heart, but boundaries guard it. They create space where love can breathe, where respect can grow, where trust can be tested slowly and honestly instead of assumed blindly. Sometimes the greatest act of love is distance. To forgive and walk away is not to give up on someone. It is to recognize that staying close would harm both them and you. If their behavior goes unchallenged, they may never see the need for change. Your boundary becomes a mirror, showing them the consequence of their actions. And even if they never change, you have kept your soul from being scarred further. Distance may feel cold in the moment, but it can be the warmest act of truth in the long run. Forgiveness without boundaries leaves you vulnerable to repetition of the same pain. Boundaries without forgiveness leave you locked in bitterness. Together, they create balance. Forgiveness cleanses the heart. Boundaries protect it from being wounded again. Both are necessary for a life of peace. Both are acts of strength. Both require courage and clarity. When you forgive without boundary, you risk being consumed. When you build boundaries without forgiveness, you risk being hardened. But when you hold them together, you walk a path that is both free and wise. Your soul was not meant to be a battlefield where the same injury is repeated endlessly. Forgiveness allows healing. Boundaries prevent re-injury. Forgiveness releases you from the past. Boundaries protect your future. To confuse the two is to live either in naive openness or in closed off resentment. But to embrace both is to live with a heart both soft and strong. free from hatred but guarded by wisdom, capable of love but unwilling to bow to harm. Every wound offers a choice: grow bitter and hard, or grow wiser and free. Pain is inevitable in human life, but what it produces within us is never inevitable. The wound itself is not the final word, it is the soil in which something new will grow. That something may be bitterness, anger, and hardness of heart, or it may be wisdom, strength, and freedom of spirit. The difference lies not in what was done to you, but in how you respond to it. Bitterness is the easier path, for it requires no effort. It is like water flowing downhill, always seeking the lowest point. When someone wounds you, it takes no courage to nurse resentment, to replay the wrong again and again in your mind, to let anger grow until it colors your view of the world. To grow bitter is simply to surrender to the gravity of pain. But this surrender comes at a cost. Bitterness does not stay contained within the wound, it spreads. It hardens your words, it distorts your vision, it poisons even your joys. In trying to protect yourself from further hurt, you end up closing yourself off from love, from trust, from hope. The heart becomes like a stone, impenetrable, but lifeless. Wisdom, by contrast, is the harder path. It asks you to rise against the gravity of pain, to take the wound and transform it into understanding. Wisdom begins with the question, not why did this happen to me, but what can I learn through this? This shift does not remove the pain, but it gives meaning to it. Every betrayal teaches you something about trust. Every insult teaches you something about insecurity. Every rejection teaches you something about strength. To grow wiser is not to deny the wound, but to let the wound refine you rather than define you. In this way, suffering becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant. Freedom is the fruit of wisdom. When you grow wise through your wounds, you discover that you are no longer bound by them. They may have shaped you, but they do not confine you. You begin to see that no person, however cruel, can dictate the future of your soul. Their action may have limited your circumstances, but only you can decide whether it will limit your heart. Freedom comes when you refuse to let pain write the story of your life. You choose instead to use pain as raw material for growth. As fire that forges steel instead of ashes that choke the air, it is worth remembering that every scar carries a story. Some tell stories of bitterness, of people who allowed wounds to rule them until they could not see beyond them. Others tell stories of wisdom, of people who faced wounds honestly, chose freedom over hatred, and emerged with strength that could not have been learned any other way. The scar is the same in both cases, but the meaning differs. The scar does not say what was done to you. It says what you chose to become through it. Consider the way a tree grows after it has been cut or struck by lightning. The wound in its trunk may remain visible, but around that wound the tree grows stronger, sometimes twisting, sometimes bending, but always reaching upward toward the light. The scar becomes part of its beauty, part of its resilience. So it is with us. A wound need not diminish us. It can, if we choose, make us deeper, stronger, wiser. The choice is always before us, and it is renewed every time the memory of the wound returns. There is a temptation to believe that bitterness offers protection, that by hardening ourselves we become safe from future harm. But bitterness is not armor, it is a cage. It does not keep pain out, it keeps you locked in. Wisdom, on the other hand, is true strength. It allows you to face the world openly, knowing you may be wounded again, but also knowing you have grown strong enough to endure, to learn, to rise. Freedom is not the absence of wounds, but the ability to live fully despite them. Every wound asks you silently, "What will you do with me?" You cannot choose whether the wound comes, but you can always choose your answer. You can allow it to plant seeds of bitterness, which will grow like thorns and choke out joy. Or you can allow it to plant seeds of wisdom, which will grow into compassion, patience, and resilience. The soil of suffering will grow something either way. The choice of what it grows is yours. Those who grow bitter often find themselves repeating cycles of harm. Hurt people, and bitterness passes easily from one heart to another. But those who grow wise break the cycle. They refuse to let pain turn them into mirrors of those who harmed them. They choose instead to become living proof that wounds can produce beauty. They show the world that pain does not have the final word, that freedom is still possible, that love can still flow from a scarred heart in the end. The measure of a life is not whether wounds were avoided, but what was chosen through them. Every person will face betrayal, rejection, cruelty, or loss. These are not avoidable in a world of imperfect hearts. But some emerge from these trials hardened and small, while others emerge deeper and freer. The same fire that melts wax hardens clay. The same sun that withers one plant strengthens another. It is not the fire or the sun that decides the outcome, but the nature of the response. So it is with wounds your soul was never meant to live imprisoned by bitterness. It was meant to live free, to grow in wisdom, to find strength in struggle. The wound you carry today may feel heavy, but even this wound offers you a choice. You can let it turn you inward, closing your heart until it becomes hard, or you can let it open your eyes, teaching you compassion, patience, and depth you did not know before. The wound will not decide this. You will